Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today, our guest is Todd Cochrane, who is the CEO of Blubrry Podcasting. Todd, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks for having me, and glad to be
Yeah,
here.
awesome. Well, you got quite the pro setup there. I think I have a couple of things to learn, but why don't we start at the beginning here? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Well, I'm a 17 plus year podcaster,
Wow.
been in the space since really the beginning in 2004.
Okay.
Formed Blueberry Podcasting in 2005, really after idea was planted in my head that there would be a particular business. And the company's actually corporate name, if people look it up, is RawVoice Incorporated, but the property Blueberry Podcasting is what everyone really knows us by. And we've been building that platform since about 2006. So we work with probably in excess of 100,000 podcasters. Not all of them are subscribers per se, but they may use our product from using our PowerPress plugin to our statistics product all the way to hosting. So, but we touch about 100,000 podcasters on a regular basis.
Wow, amazing. Doing this for 17 years, you're going to accumulate a lot of clients along the way.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the business also had evolved. We didn't start out as a service business. We largely started out as a advertising rep firm almost. We if we'd have stayed that route, we'd have ended up probably like some of the other big ones that have gotten acquired. But at the time, we changed the model to make sure we would stay in business as time,
Sure.
as the business developed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'll be honest. Before we started this podcast, I wasn't much of a podcast listener myself. Obviously, I've gotten more into it since then. But going back to 2004, 2005, what was the state of the industry back then? I mean, you said yourself you were one of the early adopters, pioneers of it. So how has the industry changed? I'm sure it's been dramatic.
Well, in 2004, there was no industry, and it was every man for themselves. And 2005, Libsyn came on the scene and started providing hosting, and really kind of allowed the space to grow because most of us were juggling just trying to keep the content online because we would run out of bandwidth real easy. When I joined the space from a business perspective, I had brought one of the first advertisers to the space, GoDaddy. They had done a trial month with me and run it went real well. And essentially what happened was they said, "Hey, do you know other podcasters that would like to be sponsored by GoDaddy?" And I said, "Yeah." And that really ultimately led to a business. But I think where the space has changed as a creator space is at that time, there was no Facebook, Twitter, there was no iPhone. It was, how you got your content was carrying around with an iPod or some other portable media device like an iRiver. You might be able to put 8 or 9 episodes on the device with the storage available. And, it was, you had to work word of mouth and by building your own website.com to grow your show. And so it was really one of those things where you really had to learn to build your podcast from the ground up and build a brand. Now there's so many different tools available. And of course, social media, the way it is, it's, some people say it's harder, but in my opinion, it's definitely easier.
Well, back in the day, right, they were originally called downloads because you literally had to download every episode, right? That was the only way to really consume it.
That's, that's
When
right.
did it all shift over to streaming?
Well, it really still isn't completely streaming
Okay.
today. If you think about if the timeline from in 2005, Apple added a podcast to iTunes at the
Mhm.
time, and then that was an inflection point. And then later, when the first iPhone came out, that was kind of an inflection point as well. Then it wasn't until they added the podcast app to be native in the podcasting into the iPhone where really it mainstreamed the space. Now, from a consumer standpoint, when they press play, they don't really care if it's being downloaded or streamed, just as long as they can listen to it. So if they've subscribed or followed to a show and it's automatically been delivered to their device, then it's technically have been downloaded. And when they click play and they're not follow or subscribed, it's being progressively downloaded, but it looks just like a stream. It's all semantics. No one cares. Um, it's not necessarily like a linear stream where you go listen to programming that you maybe join in the middle. You definitely get that on-demand experience, and that's really what the space has been all about, is being able to listen to content on your time, when you want to, where you want to. And, again, we didn't have to have connectivity, and that remains the case today. You can still listen to podcasts on airplanes without internet.
I've recently participated in a couple of podcasts that were live streams, right? Where, it was delivered as we were talking, which is
Sure.
interesting from an interactive perspective, of getting questions in real time and comments on what we were saying. Do you see more of that coming, more of an interactive type podcasting, or is that a niche that you think will just kind of be its own thing?
No, I've been live streaming for 11 years,
Okay.
and there was really a reason for it. I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I was doing the show at 8 p.m. Hawaiian, 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern, 11 Pacific, and I had no audience interaction and really wanted it. I was a solo show. So just a few people that would come in from Australia or New Zealand or wherever they were in their time zone where they could watch me provided enough audience interaction that really helped, for me at least, to get that immediate feedback. And I think that's where a lot of podcasters today are enjoying doing live, is they get to do the show as a podcast, delivered as a podcast, but during the recording of it, they get a little bit of that interaction that allows, a little bit of feedback. Maybe you maybe on Facebook and someone does a Facebook, comment. And it really adds some real time flavor to the show, while at the same time, being able to have that experience of a normal, intimate conversation, a podcast. So I think a lot of live streaming folks, the challenge they have, and I've made the mistake even myself a few times, is that you have to remember that 99% of your audience is listening. So if you're showing something on a screen and you're not describing it, you're going to alienate those that are watching, or I mean, are listening.
Sure.
So you have to be kind of cognizant of that there's people that can't see what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're recording this on video right now and of course, have the visual cues, but that can be very easy to forget, right? And all of a sudden, you've
Sure.
alienated your listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any particular type of podcast or format that you think the live works better for, or maybe should stay away from entirely?
Well, I often wonder. I'm here in my studio that I do my tech show in, and it's a one man show.
Mhm.
And I just finished 1,600 episodes on Monday, or the 1,600. And I've often wondered why people want to watch me do about a 1 hour program where it's a solo show and there's really not a lot going on. Whereas the show I do on Wednesday, the new media show, I have a co host and there's bantering back and forth. So both of those get equal number of people that watch live. So I don't know if there's a strategy per se on um, for a single or a interview show, if it's one's better than the other. But I will say this is it does give me the opportunity when I'm live to be able to show on my screen something that I'm talking about.
Mhm. Okay.
And for that live audience, they get that interaction. Now, at the same time, I also release my video portion as an actual podcast as well. A lot of people don't know that you can do that, but you can do audio and video podcasts. So there's a separate RSS feed that the uh, has the video in it. So some people listen, some people watch, and I think it works either way.
Yeah. What have you seen from like it? How has that trend changed over time? And what are others seeing today in terms of like listeners wanting to consume that audio versus video, or in different ways?
Yeah, I really think it depends on the audience. And again, I don't wanna pigeonhole folks, but there's a lot more hours to listen than there are to watch. And if your audience has built you into their schedule, AKA they know that the episode's gonna release at Monday at 8 p.m. and they can have it in their phone the next morning and listen to it on the commute or at the gym or wherever they may be, they've built you into their schedule. So they've sliced you in wherever they're gonna fit you. And excuse me, I've been fighting a cough. Um, the Whereas on the video piece, if they're actually watching and not just playing it to listen, then I think that is a little different of an experience, and you're maybe using a different slice of time. So, again, I think in the end, I think what it is those that add a video component to their show um, will become better podcasters because you have to be prepared. You can't go into the episode not prepared, and then if you're a prolific editor, video is very, very difficult to edit and make it look well. So I think those that do audio and video become better audio podcasters just because they're more prepared. They know they got one shot at this and getting it right. I've made mistakes. Matter of fact, on the last show, I very rarely edit, and I had a coughing spasm going on, so I edited the show, added those coughs out
Mhm.
where I left it in the video.
Gotcha.
So it's again a different circumstance for the type of content, but I think both work well.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point right there because I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of commentary back and forth on this about how edited you need to be. It used to be everything should be polished and very professional, and it seems like now people are actually looking for more authentic, like almost spelling mistakes and things like that. So, what's your feeling in podcasting now about editing things down?
Well, I'm pretty old school, okay, so if you're a burgeoning podcaster, don't take my advice and just understand there's no rules. Um, when I started podcasting, I had 3 young children. I had a full-time job. I was very, very busy. Um, so I had no time to edit. So what I did was I made sure my equipment chain was the best it could be, so the audio sounded the best it could be, and that I would be prepared as best as I could be. I know that's a bunch of words, but um, which would allow the content to come out fairly decent without having to edit. I still said ahs and hums and had things in there that probably should have been edited out, but I just didn't have the time and I didn't have the sanity. I would not be a podcaster today if I had to have edited. Now, as I've done podcasting for a longer period of time, I've gotten better at being more concise and having a good message and not really having a lot of those ahs and hums in there. But there's still some nights that I'm tired and don't do as a good a performance as I should and probably should edit, but I don't. Now, on the other hand, on the other side of the factor, my Blubrry podcast, the podcast insider that we do, is professionally edited. Our Blubrry Pro team edits it and takes care of it and cleans it up and makes us sound smarter than we are. So I think I think there's both ways you can look at it. I've always said that if you're a YouTuber, people will forgive you for bad video, but they won't forgive you for bad audio. And I think in podcasting, it's the same. I think bad, those is a relative word. Bad being, does it sound good? Now, that's the first step. Sustained superior content is going to get you a long way down the road in building an audience, but I don't get wrapped up too much because we're all human and we all have pauses and we think and we try to fit words into conversation. So I'm not too focused on making sure that audio is perfect, at least on my aspect. I know some people believe that you have to edit to the ninth degree, and I don't know. You can over
Right.
edit, but I think some editing probably is advisable for most people. Again, I can really count on two hands now the number of times I've actually had to edit a show. And again, this prior Monday was one of those times because I didn't want to subject the audience to, me coughing in their ear,
Sure.
which, if you think about it, it's pretty rude.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Definitely two schools of thought there. What
yeah.
I'm sure you've got people coming to you with podcasting ideas. Some maybe have done them before, but probably a lot haven't, right? They're just interested in exploring the space. So, what is some of the basic advice you're giving them these days about jumping into it?
Yeah, don't chase a category.
Right?
If you think that true crime is the current thing that's hot, don't go chasing it. You need to chase your passion. I always ask people when they're asking me, "Well, what should I do my podcast about?" I'm like, "Well, what do you get excited talking about? Do you get excited talking about whiskey? Do you get excited talking about cigars? Do you get excited talking about business? Do you get excited talking about sports?
Mhm.
What's your thing?" Everyone has a passion, and if you don't have, like, this fantastic passion for something, then the second is, what's your mission? What message are you trying to impair? What is the goal of the show? Is the goal to change a life? Is the goal to have a funnel to get people into your business? There's variety of reasons for doing podcasts. Is your goal to be rich and famous? Well, maybe podcasting isn't the great place to start to do that, but who knows, right?
Right.
So I think that it really boils down to the goal of the show. But I think in the end, the reason why after 17 plus years, 17 half years or so, that I continue to do a tech show is I'm excited to talk about it and give my opinion. And I'm excited to talk about podcasting. So we're fast approaching 500 episodes on the new media show. And so it's really one of those things where if you can talk about it on the dime, then I think that's probably a good topic for you. And it also, can you go 2 years on the same
Same
topic?
topic. Yeah.
If
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I that's really good advice. It sounds simple, but I think it's really good advice because to your point, it's easy to burn out on something. But when it's something that you're passionate about and you're
Oh,
constantly looking for a new angle on it or thinking about it in different ways, those episodes are going to come, pretty naturally, right?
yep. And I've got one show that I pod faded on, and to be honest with you, I was pretty passionate about it, but it was what I found was I was having a difficult time booking people that I wanted to be on the show. So for me, it became too much work. I still loved doing the show, but I think I got half a dozen episodes in, and I'm like, I'm pulling teeth to get someone to come on in this particular topic niche. And so I think all of us may find a show that doesn't work. Now, that's another thing too. If it isn't working, shift, change. Rob and I, Rob Greenlee and I, who do the new media show, that show started as a Saturday morning tech show. And what we found was after about 200 episodes, we were spending more time talking about podcasting than we were about tech. So mid show one day, I said, "Rob, this is dumb." I said, "All we're talking about is podcasting." I said, "We need to change the name of this show." I said, "And the focus isn't tech." And we came up with a name of the show live while we were recording, and I actually Googled the domain name and registered it online during the show, and we changed the show right during the show.
Wow.
So I think now that's an extreme. So I don't necessarily recommend doing that, but in the end, it was the best move for the podcast because here we are, fast approaching 500 episodes on that, 10 plus years of doing that show, and it's got a huge, huge creator listening audience.
It's an extreme example of changing on the fly there,
Yeah,
but I'm sure that was an
extreme,
interesting
extreme.
episode as well.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I've heard some abysmal statistics around how long podcasts stay around, like those that get into it, but how long they keep their series going. But what are you seeing, and what's the secret to long term success?
Well, the secret, well, first of all, let's talk about pod failure, pod fading. Um, Number one, creating content is difficult. So some get into this thinking it's going to be easy, and they find out very, very quickly it's not. Number two, people determine they don't have the passion they thought they did to be able to do this, or that they get dedication to do it. So still, probably about 50% of shows that start on day one fail before they get to episode 7. They just don't make it to 7. And then those that make it to 7 have a pretty good chance to getting to 20. But those that get to 20 will have already lost another 50%. So you're really, if you started with 100, you're left with 25 that made it to episode 20. Those shows will typically make it 2 years at least. Uh, I think that the shows that we see, and knock on wood here, I'm very, very thankful. The shows that we see at Blubrry that have the longest longevity are those that are building a brand on their own .com. They have a mission. They are either using it as a funnel, business building. They have a structure of what they want to accomplish for the show. And our churn rate is incredibly low because of that, because they're not just coming in and being on a platform that's free, and they just say, okay, test, test, test. And then the next thing is that show's in the graveyard and really never made it out of the gate. So I think that what has driven the high percentage of failures across the space is the exact point is, oh, it's free, let's try it. And then 3 days or 3 episodes later, they're like, well, we're not getting any listeners, but they've done nothing but record the show. They're expecting instant gratification. And in all honesty, this is a medium in which, unless you're an Oprah Winfrey or someone to that effect that already has a pre-built audience, and if you might be known in your community and you'll have family and friends, but if you're going to build yourself as an authority on the content that you're creating, you got to earn that.
Sure.
You have to earn that authority.
Mhm.
That's really the key. And when I started my tech show, guess what? I was in the bottom of the barrel too. I had no authority in the space. And over time, built a reputation, did a lot of interviews at events like the Consumer Electronics Show. It's a big tech thing.
Mhm.
And that really helped establish my bona fides for the actual podcast and having the authority to have experience of, 100, 200, 300 particular episodes where I've talked about content, about stuff again and again. But I also had a tech background before I started doing the podcast. I was in the aviation field, so I had a semblance of what was going on in tech space. So I think it really boils down to is I've made a real long sentence here, or statement, but it's being passionate about what you want and deciding, I think those that succeed have done so with purpose. I know a lot of people just can never get out of the blocks and go. The best thing to do is pull up the mic and see if it's for you and record an episode or two and go. But again, it's more than just recording. If you want to grow your show, there's about 30 other things you have to do, literally.
Well, hit on a couple there. What are some of the other things, and how do you build authority these days besides just, recording more and more episodes?
Building authority is, you have to go where your audience is. So if you're doing a show on business, you need to go to business shows. You need to be talking with people. You need to be on panels. You need to be participating in your content genre. And, it may take time, but that's how I did it.
Mhm.
And maybe, it's maybe an old school way of thinking. It's not like TikTok or Instagram where you can kind of build yourself almost from the instantly. Podcasting really is about this intimate relationship you have with an audience. So they can smell, if you spend a lot of time with them, they can smell a fake a mile away. So you have to be real, you have to be genuine, you have to be consistent. And guess what? You have to be willing to put your neck out a little bit and say, "This is what I think," and then defend that if someone comes and say you're wrong and do it respectfully. But at the same time, I think that building authority can be done many ways. It can be by blogging. It can be done by, again, building social media presence. It's really multiple things that go into it. And sometimes you have to make your own authority. And as an example, I was getting ready to do, I don't know, 3 or 400th episode, something like that, or maybe it was 500th episode. And I called the local television station. Hey, I'm getting ready to celebrate episode 500. Well, they needed a 2-minute spot. They came out and spent 30 minutes in my studio, or an hour, and I got a 2-minute spot on TV.
Nice.
Sometimes you just got to go. Yeah. So
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to go and take the bull by the horns. I was at an event where I saw the BBC, and I walked up and I said, "Hey, how do I get on this show?" And they said, "What do you know?" And I told them. They said, "Well, just by chance, we have a little time." And I got a couple of minutes of airtime. And then ultimately, what that led to then was being on the BBC call list. They'd call me at 3 o'clock in the morning and wake me up and say, "Hey, Mr. Cochrane, can you talk about this?" And now, I may not have known the topic, but I knew from the time they called me, the time I had to be in front of the mic was about 10 minutes, and Google was my friend. So I'm not saying fake it till you make it, but I went to my computer and often would Google and get read up real quick on the topic, and then have all they're looking for is a 45-second
Sure.
soundbite
Right.
to bring you in.
Hmm.
Todd Cochrane's checking in from Honolulu, Hawaii, blah, 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 blah. And you give them a few sound bites and you're out. So that was used as part of my resume to ultimately build authority, ultimately be able to do live on stage with NBC Universal at some events. It really, it, and you have to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to stretch. The book deal that I did with writing the first book on podcasting, that definitely helped. So every podcaster's got a book in them because every interview they do is a new chapter. So there's lots of opportunities to build authority and build your brand.
Very interesting to hear you say that because I was pondering recently that we've recorded over 70 episodes at this point, which is just amazing to think about that, we've gotten this far. But, I sit here week to week and I interview people like yourselves who have been there and built subscription-based businesses and been able to hear so many different perspectives. And I'm like, this all I have to do is kind of summarize and pull the themes out of everything that I've heard and use their examples, and I've probably got a book's
Sure.
worth of content already if I really went back and thought about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
I'm sure you do. And you probably got a segment or two that you could tie
Yeah,
together. There's all kinds of things that's out
yeah.
there. And it's the business side of podcasting, is his own craziness at this point. But I think that for those that are coming on and wanting to be creators, there's huge opportunity, especially if it's help using that podcast to build their business. So, there's lots of opportunities here. And we found during COVID was that companies were already on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They had all these locations, but they weren't doing podcasting. And then when everyone kind of sheltered in place, they said, "How do we reach these folks?" Well, that many companies started doing podcasts as another way to reach someone that may not be able to reach in the store or reach
Mhm.
a variety of different ways. So podcasting became business podcasts exploded in 2020.
Yeah. I would, to be honest, I think we're a use case of that or an example of that as well. I mean, we used to rely very much on going to conferences, being on panels, speaking, and then just the network opportunities that happen there. When all of that came to a grinding halt, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, guys, what are we going to do? How do we, build new
Right.
relationships and things like that, and even nurture the ones that we've already got? And podcasting seemed like a great way to do that. It was a great excuse to get on a Zoom for an hour and just have a chat. It's been fantastic for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too is businesses have realized that consumers don't want to be pitched. They want to be educated.
Mhm.
And if you give them a reason to want to use your product or service or do business with you,
Yeah.
and, really in the end, um, especially business is always local. unless you're a big national brand. And if you're a small business, where do you gain business? It's through those relationships. And podcasting for someone wanting to grow their business outside their local community is a great way to build relationships outside of the local, you maybe your local county or jurisdiction that you work in. Bigger the company, obviously, it's there's different goals and bigger marketing budgets, but at the same time, you know, as a small business person, you want to drive them to your business, not someone else's.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Blueberry, the business itself. Obviously, you've been doing this for a long time. There's more, I would guess, competitors in the space now that are doing things similar to what you guys are doing. But you were, one of the early tools that are out there. So, talk about the evolution of the business and how you got to the product set that you have today.
Yeah, so like I said, we started off as largely doing ad rep, and we were doing big podcast ad buys with 400 or 500 shows on a buy. And what we started to see, though, because back in the early days there was only small shows, and when big shows started to appear, and the use case I like to give is the Adam Carolla show. That was one of the kind of breakout ones that came early. Advertising dollars, I started seeing the budget kind of shrink a little bit. And I was asking the ad buyers, why are we shrinking the ad budget? And they say, well, we're rolling that money up into bigger shows. And what we found as a company was once a podcaster got to a certain size, they didn't use me as a rep no more. They went on, did their own deal. And we started to see that money flip out, and I started to freak out. So we pivoted and decided to bring on services. And the first service we brought on was our paid statistics platform. And that got some revenue coming in for people paying a subscription every month for that paid statistics. And we were lucky enough to um, bring on the market PowerPress, that podcasting plugin, about the time another plugin was abandoned. And that, it's like that candy at the end of when you're in checkout, you look down there and there's that Snickers bar, right? Say, I should grab one of
Mhm.
those. Well, PowerPress for us was really a true lifesaver because it got us in front of a lot of podcasters very, very quickly. So they saw they could use our stats. And then we kind of woke up a little bit and said, hey, why don't we add hosting to this? So this really the second product was we brought on hosting, and then we've added a variety of other services like private podcasting. We have ad insertion. We have a pro platform. We have a network promotion tool. So really, at this time, as I speak right now, we are a full faceted, 100%. Basically, we have it all for a podcaster that wants to build and grow a show. And what's interesting is now the advertising space is changing a little bit, and we're currently working on bringing on programmatic advertising. So every podcaster, not just those big shows, every podcaster, large and small, can at least earn some revenue from programmatic. So in the end, it's almost like we went full circle here. We've come back and we're starting to add the advertising piece, but we were lucky as the ad revenue was going down, the service revenue was going up, and they passed kind of in the middle. And we really never saw a dip. In other words, revenue stayed well. It's able to keep the company going, make payroll, and we were very, very smart in the early days. And I still do. I have a CFO that is very conservative on spend. We have cash reserve. We don't buy more than we can afford. It's really, from that standpoint, I never went in debt. So I didn't have to have a note hanging over my head, and I had enough cash reserve to move beyond, a recession, something to that effect, and not be affected. So the subscription base is one that where we try to eke out a little more every year, try to raise, you know what your average revenue per customer is, and you try to bump that a little bit every year. And how do you do that? You bring more value, add on services, and it's incrementally slow to grow that, but at the same time, you have this influx of new content creators. Now, 5 years ago, I had 5 competitors. Now I've got 25. So it's a little bit different space from a competitive landscape. So we knew we were getting a little long in the tooth. Having been in business since 2005, the platform had went through a few updates, but nothing real like super major. So really about the time the pandemic kicked off, and this was already planned, pandemic aside, we decided to completely gut the system. We gutted it from the website to the UI to the stats platform to everything. We rebuilt the platform from scratch. Now the core of the platform is the same, but the shell, which people see publicly, is potential. Well, it is. It's the outside is brand new, and we've been thinking about what podcasters need and what do we hear, and we did some studies and we made sure that we knew who our user personas were. So because you think you know who your customer is, but do you really know who your
Age
customer
old
is?
question.
We actually paid a company to come and do a user study, and they found some things out. Some stuff we knew, some stuff we didn't know. And we said, oh, so you take that into your growth strategy. And we spent 2 years really tackling that pretty hard. And just this last month, we kind of finished what I would kind of call the new Blubrry. We didn't really call it that publicly, but we got to the point where we had drawn a line in the sand. So now I'm focused on integrations. We're adding new stuff. I don't have to worry about the paint. The paint's dry. Now let's just make it look more pretty. So we're going to add more features to podcasters, and it's really about growth. We're anything that comes to me from an idea standpoint, how does that help a podcaster grow? Is it going to help them grow their show, grow their audience? Because I'm a service provider. How do I get paid? I get paid by podcasters doing their shows, and if they're growing, then they're going to continue to pay their bill. If they are not growing and they get discouraged, they're going to quit. And we're going to want to help them in their journey. We can't, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But at least there's going to be water there to make sure that we have everything they need to grow their show.
So looking at your website, I saw two primary plans there, a standard plan and an advanced plan, $12 and $20 a month, that have a whole host of benefits within them, right? You've talked about all of these features that you have added over the years. Have you moved everybody into these two plans, or do you have some people on some more a la carte plans, or what does your offering, your base look like today?
Well, there's really a third plan. There's a pro plan as well, a little further down the page. So what we did was the $12 plan is really the base. And the $20 plan is, and we have an annual now as well. We just added annual, believe it or not, today. People can pay for an annual plan now versus a monthly plan and get a little discount. But the $20 plan can be incremented up based on whatever additional storage they need. So that plan actually will scale all the way to 80. Then there's a pro plan that's at 100. So each plan gets you a little more. So the $12 plan gets you everything you really need to get going. The $20 plan gets you a little more plus some extra benefits. And then the $100 plan, which is the pro plan, brings in pro tools like ad insertion, the network building tool, people that are building multiple 6 or 7 or 10 shows or 100 or whatever it may be. So we have really something for the beginner all the way up to the individual that's a pro. But at the same time, we've way we've laid this out is, let's say you're a millennial and you don't believe you need your own .com. It's okay. I've got a landing page for you, just like Twitter or Instagram, where you can just have a single show page. But what we find is podcasters kind of graduate up into some of our other products. Like every customer of ours, regardless of hosting level, we give them a free WordPress site. That's included with the hosting. And once they're on a $20 plan, they can map a domain to it. uh, and it really then kind of changes the scheme of things. So it doesn't look like yourshow.blueberry.net. It's yourshow.com. Again, shows graduate up into that, and we try to make it easy for them to do so. So we're now going to be making some announcements soon about integrations with other platforms. Again, helping the podcaster in the production and growth of their show. But really, that's what it boils down to. And again, I do have enterprise clients too that are on the other scope of things where we've done white label and those types of deals before, but those are very few and far between because it's a long time to get that through the contract. The private internal podcasting product we call PIP. Matter of fact, I leave for Orlando on Saturday, go down for the ATD show. It's mostly HR and training people at that event. So we're looking at internal company communication. So that's it's not necessarily an enterprise product, but it's a product that ties into where a company can authenticate their listener so that you know who's listening to what content and have security levels and secure content behind a firewall.
So is that for training, internal training and things like that, or what's their use cases?
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
It's really training. It could be executive messaging. It could be onboarding. It's even being used by some banks for financial sharing of investor information. It's done by hospitals. It's really the full gambit. And the main thing is we've got it staggered with 4 different security levels, so that if you are the hospital and you've got HIPAA information and there's no way you want that audio content to reside on the device, we actually stream it to the device. We don't even plant the media on there. Then there's different levels of security based upon need. And so, some companies just say, oh, well, we don't need no security on this, or yep, I need most extreme or somewhere in between.
How are new customers finding you today? What channels are working? Obviously, there's word of mouth. Obviously, there's podcasts like this that are going to spread it. But what's working for you
Sure.
guys?
It's everything. It's Google search. It's word of mouth. The plugin. Oftentimes people install the plugin, don't even know
Mm,
we offer hosting,
mm,
and we're very careful, trying not to make sure we mess with WordPresses because they're kind of sensitive to commercial offerings within plugins. So we've got that set up so that we stay within the lines there. But really, it's about trying to onboard people, and the the key is getting people up and running quickly, getting them through the sign up process, and getting to the point where they create episode one. But really, it's social media, it's advertising, it's the full run of typical marketing tools to be able to be found and heard. We've had some struggle with SEO, and so we've spent some time working on that, and to be ranked higher in some of those key search terms we want. So, but a lot of times it is definitely word of mouth too. That helps us quite a bit.
yeah,
But the pure fact that when people search for a plugin, they find our PowerPress plugin, it almost assures we're at least going to get they're going to get some insight. Oh, who's this company, Blubrry Podcasting, and how can they help me?
those are good impressions for sure.
Right.
Are most of your new customers brand new to podcasting, or is it existing podcasters that are looking to a better tool set and are migrating over?
Yeah, people that migrate are few and far between. That what we've really worked on is, and we have more coming, is a compelling reason to move.
Mhm.
As an example, we just added multi-user accounts. So you can have an administrator and then sub-accounts. Someone you assign stats, access to, some that's only a publisher, so that if you're working with a team, not everyone's logging everyone can log in underneath their own login. It's just those types of things we've tried to add. Our stats, new stats, and our retention graph has blown people away. We're getting people to move for that. So we do have a number of folks that are migrating. But again, a lot of people are scared of migrating, and it can be scary if you don't know what you're doing. That's why I have a support team that you can call on the phone and and get help. So I think that um, we're just trying to make it easier. Matter of fact, our tools are set up to help people migrate seamlessly. but we still want them to work with our support team doing it. And then, of course, new podcasters or people that are adding additional shows. During the pandemic, people were starting new shows left and right. They were running 2, 3 different shows. We think that is starting to pull back a little bit as people have got their lives back and they're back to basketball games and baseball and gymnastics and everything else that absorbed our time before the pandemic. So yeah, a large number of new podcasters too that are coming in the door. So the goal then obviously with those folks is really, goal for them is get them to episode 1.
Well, once you get them in the door and they've recorded episode 1 and are off and running, we talk about this a lot on this show is how do you limit the churn, right? Those that are falling out the other side. I know there's clearly some things that are not within your control, right? If they just find that podcasting isn't for them or don't have the time to do it. But
Yep.
what tactics do you guys have in place to keep them?
Well, number 1, we have webinars every month.
Okay.
Training webinars. We have educational newsletters that go out. We're getting ready to add a library of educational materials so that they have ongoing education to help grow their show that comes from a trusted source. So there's a variety of things that we do to try to keep, and again, providing them insightful insights of what's going on with their show to help them grow their show. What's happening within my podcast are people listening all the way to the end? And we have some new tools and some new graphs that basically say, okay, I'm losing part of the audience at about 50%. Why? Why are they leaving? And it gives the podcaster the ability to do some internal analysis and say, are they leaving because of a segment, or are they leaving because I'm getting boring, or whatever it may be? And so some podcasters are using that tool to see the engagement rate of the podcast throughout its, and those are for active listeners. It's not for people that are subscribed or followed, but people that have actually hit play and listened partial way through and bailed out.
I could see that being very valuable. If you see a trend
Yeah.
towards, hey, 3 minutes, 30 seconds in, they're dropping, that might start to tell you something, right?
Yeah, we had an enterprise client that saw a specific show just about 45 minutes, they just lost them.
Um,
People were going off, and they went and analyzed that content for that specific show and figured there was a segment in there. They figured, well, that segment's always kind of annoyed us. It's probably annoyed the audience too. They removed that segment, and even though the show shortened up by 3 or 4 minutes, they got that completion rate of that show
Great.
near the 97, 98%
Wow,
mark.
that's very valuable
Yeah, just
information.
for a single. Yeah, very valuable. But again, you have to look at that over time, episode after episode. You never know when you're going to lose somebody. We're not always on our A game. So sometimes people just have life. They get to work and they forget to come back to it. So maybe it's no fault of your own.
That for sure happens. Well, Todd, this has been so much fun to talk with you. Of course, as a podcaster, have certainly learned some things. But if any of the listeners, want to chat with you, want to learn more about Blubrry, where can they go?
It's easy. Blubrry.com, Blubrry without the E's, BLUBRRY.com. As I jokingly say, we couldn't afford the E's. And why Blubrry? Well, that's another whole 30-minute discussion. But I'm Todd at Blubrry.com. Again, BLUBRRY.com. All our social media is about the same. Join our Facebook group, and again, if you're a podcaster and you're actually working with us, our support team is fantastic, and they're reachable via our ticket system at blubrry.com/support. But I do offer every podcaster that works with us essentially a 30-minute free in-person consult. And we do a Zoom call, and I get in and look at their website, look at their content, give suggestions. I try to do 4 or 5 of those a week. Can't do 100, but I do a number, and it's not too hard to get on the list. But we really want to help podcasters grow, and we've got a mission to do that, and that's our primary focus. But I want to thank you for giving me some time to talk about the company.
Oh, awesome. Again, appreciate everything you shared today. And, maybe we'll have you on some other time. We can talk for 30 minutes about why it's called Blubrry.
Yeah. Well, it's a fun story to begin with. Let's just say a cold evening in Chicago. We'll start it there on a
Hey,
dreary night.
hey, I like that tease right there. We'll end it there and kind of hold it out there and maybe save that for another day. Awesome. Well,
All right, sir.
thanks so
Thank you
much,
so
Todd.
much.
Really appreciate it.